Hello and welcome to Just One Q, the podcast where we explore the latest ideas in workplace belonging in conversation with thought leaders and experts. Each episode, a guest and I dive into a question that highlights their area of expertise. The goal is to leave you with tools and insights you can use to make your workplace better and more human-friendly. I'm your host, Dominique. I'm an inclusion educator and advocate working for Dialectic, an inclusive workplace learning consultancy in lovely Guelph, Ontario, which is situated on the treaty lands and territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional lands of the Chinooktun and the Haudenosaunee peoples. Scott Mooney is my guest today, and Scott is an award-winning educational illustrator with over 30 years in practice. He brings clarity, humanity, and imagination to every project, helping organizations teach, inspire, and engage through visual communications that make people care as well as understand. Scott launched his illustration career in 1994, drawing cartoons and illustrations for publications of the Office of Research at the University of Guelph, where he also earned his Honours BA in Fine Art. He went on to work for the creative team at the safety communications company Creative Options for 3 years, and then moved on to a freelance career where he worked independently and led teams of artists. Scott's projects have included 2 graphic novels, a series of 260 illustrations for 3 publications by the Canadian Red Cross, and a series of whiteboard animations for the food security organization Feeding 9 Billion. He's also worked with clients including recognizable brands like Lowe's, Coca-Cola, Whole Foods, Macy's, Ford Motor Company, ACOM, Salesforce, and too many more for me to list. Scott works in Guelph, Ontario as well, where he lives with his wife, commercial photographer Trina Coster, and their 2 dogs. Welcome to the show, Scott. So great to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on today and to talk about your creative work and also about your journey with ADHD. So the question that we're going to be grounding our conversation in today is, how can ADHDers thrive at work? And I'm hoping that we can come at this from a bunch of different angles and talk about the challenges and strengths that come with neurodivergent brains and some strategies that you've used personally and that you teach others. And we're also going to talk about your work in visual storytelling in particular and how that can be used to support ADHDers and anyone who just prefers visual learning more broadly at work. So Scott, I want to start with your personal ADHD discovery and your mindset about it. When did you first recognize that you were navigating life with an ADHD brain?
I've always joked that I have ADHD just because of my distractibility, and I didn't really take it too seriously. And then 5 years ago, a friend of mine I was talking on the phone with, and I was telling him some of the struggles that I have with getting myself organized and being in action in the right places and doing the right things. And he said, "Have you ever been tested for ADHD? Because you sound a lot like my son, having the same issues." And I said, "No." So I took it seriously and I bought a book called Driven to Distraction by Ned Halloway, which is one of the early books written about it, a groundbreaking book. And as I was reading that book, after years of doing personality tests and things, trying to figure myself out, there were times when I was crying reading that book because I could see myself in what was going on for these people and for people like me, and to see that there are things that can be done about it to help me manage myself better.
Yeah. How did that feel to you? Was it like a happy feeling, a relieving feeling? Were you distraught? What was the mindset there?
No, it was a really relieving feeling. I felt like finally I have something that makes sense to me. I've tried so many different ways of doing things, and to know that I have something specific to work on with actual tools that pre-exist that are designed for people like me, it was really wonderful. I became completely fascinated, and I read as many books as I could, and I just did a deep dive, hyper focus on what ADHD is and how to live with it and how to maximize the gifts of it.
I mean, I'm sure that between the 2 of us, we could make quite a list of books. Actually, maybe we should do that and throw it into the show notes. But
Sure.
I've read my fair share too. I'm a parent of kids who have ADHD as well. So that is in my experience as well. But from a parenting perspective, just
Hmm.
having had, the experience of reading and identifying and having things jump off the page, like that's exactly it.
Yeah.
And what a relieving feeling that can be. People relate to ADHD in such different ways. Certainly now, I guess we're seeing more and more positive depictions of ADHD, more openness, certainly, about and disclosure of diagnoses and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And some people describe it as a challenge or a gift, and others still a disability or even a way of being. How do you understand and describe ADHD, and has it shifted at all over time?
I mean, I choose to look at the gifts. That there are challenges that are annoying for me and others, but at the same time, I was just telling someone the other day, I don't think I would be me if I didn't have ADHD, and I like who I am. So I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the creativity that it brings. It gives me certain abilities that are not normal, so they become valuable to me and others.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're going to get into some of those abilities in a while because I think your work honestly really speaks for itself. And I know not everybody listening knows your work, but I hope that they get to know your work and are
Mhm.
able to appreciate it because it is really visible when you do see your work, Scott, that your talent is immense and there's just so much communication and emotion and information packed into the way that you illustrate and the way that you think as a visual thinker is really, really amazing. So I hope that others can appreciate that too. You've mentioned to me that there's a different name too for ADHD that helps you kind of repackage it. Do you
Mhm.
want to maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's called VAST and it's variable attention stimulus trait. And what I like about it is it's described as a trait, not as a disability.
Mm.
And I feel like the only reason it's considered a disability is because it makes it difficult for people with a brain like mine to fit into the way society happens to be right now and the things that society values. Through my men's group, I created a group of men with ADHD that we just have a little chat group in WhatsApp, and I call it Vast Men of Legacy. So
Nice.
Legacy is the name of our organization, Legacy Guelph. We like to look at each other as having gifts, and our challenges are spoken about as well. Mhm.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the things in the past that you might have been hard on yourself for, or before you fully understood ADHD or VAST?
Mhm.
What were the things that sort of bothered you or that you felt were different about you that you couldn't get a grip on?
It showed up a lot as like being intelligent, but not being able to accomplish things a lot of the time. So I could accomplish things if they were interesting and fun, and do a really great job and get hyper focused on those and learn amazing things. But at the same time, like there were certain topics that I couldn't handle. And later I learned that dysregulation was a big part of that, emotional dysregulation. So if I
Mm.
couldn't figure something out, I would get very anxious. And in that state, I would not learn well. And I just wanted to get out of that state. And so I would do something else instead. So it caused a lot of avoidance. It still affects me today. And then there's
Mhm.
another one that is called oppositional defiance.
Mm.
And that comes up in me sometimes too, where I'll just say no, like to whatever, anything anyone says. And then that creates issues in my relationships and it creates issues in me getting things done because I'm not accepting help or things like that. So those were the main ones that affected me.
Yeah. And I think that will resonate with a lot of folks, certainly folks that I know who have ADHD, including people in my own family, have very, very similar challenges. And a lot of people struggle for a long time. Like, I mean, as you did, you're an adult, right? Like this late
Mhm.
diagnosis or late realization can probably, it's been so long in living like you're defined by these challenges, perhaps. And
Mhm.
so I can see how the gift of having an explanation for it would be really relieving.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about in this conversation some of the tools that you've developed because what I know from you is that you've managed to sort of really changed the way that you've worked to serve yourself. And we're going to talk a little bit in more detail about some of those strategies. But something that you just touched on that I want to grab onto before we do that is this idea of informal peer support. And I know that you've also participated in more structured mentorship with other men who also have ADHD. So, what have you learned through those conversations about the range of ADHD experiences, or how has it benefited you to be part of those conversations?
hmm Yeah, the chat group is pretty informal, but it's a place where somebody can just throw into their, I can't get my head focused on this thing right now. I can't stop hyper focusing on this other thing and things like that. So if we're stuck or there's
Mm,
something you can just say it into the space and there's people in there who get it. And some people have something helpful to say because they can relate and they have tools that they used and things. It's really a great place to feel heard and feel like you're not the only person who has this challenge. Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure such a valuable thing. Like, I'm wondering, does it matter that it's other men? Does that change things for you in terms of who's in the group and having that support and camaraderie specifically from peers?
Hmm. I don't think in general it should matter, but I happen to have access to a group of men who are used to communicating at a very deep level with each other.
Mm,
So we've built a lot of trust already. And so to be able to have a space, like not everybody in the men's group has ADHD. So a lot of the time the other men don't get us. They don't understand why didn't you follow through on that thing? And to say literally, I forgot just doesn't cut it, right? Like so it's good to have people who get it.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, we all need people who get it, right? We
Yeah.
absolutely all of us need that.
Yeah.
Within that group, I'm sure in your conversations with folks, you've really picked up on all kinds of things that people are doing to find their own way through life and their own way of doing things, figuring out those systems and workarounds and things that make sense. I kind of want to ask you, how does that show up in your creative work as an illustrator? Do you find that ADHD affects how you see or communicate stories visually?
I have a reading issue. I was diagnosed with an eye teaming issue, so my eyes struggle to track text. So there's that. I think I might have a bit of dyslexia, but I don't really know that for sure. And the ADHD. So I get distracted. So reading is a very slow process for me. I really love reading. I love great novels and stories, but I gravitated towards visual things because I had a lot more flow in reading those things. As a kid, I watched a lot of TV, which people thought was a really bad idea. But a lot of what I watched a lot was goofy comedies, but also documentaries,
Yeah,
because in those days you watched whatever was on TV, and so certain times that's what was on, and I found those fascinating. And I feel that I have actually most of my like knowledge gathering from my childhood came from watching TV and learning things from documentaries, but also learning from watching movies and cartoons and just absorbing the artistry of those things and learning how they structure communication at a really deep kind of intuitive level.
right.
How do you set up the information so that later in the program people understand what the gag is or what the conflict or the misunderstanding is? And comics was another thing that I love because I like to draw. I have been drawing since before I could read, before I even remember. My mom says that I was drawing since I was about 2 years old,
Oh,
maybe even
wow.
earlier. So it's always been something I did to entertain myself or to explore, like create scenarios and explore story creation, even from a young age. And for example, for a year, my mom had a store in downtown Victoria, BC. And down the street from the store, there was a used bookshop that had really cheap comics. And I would go and buy a bunch of comics and I would absorb those and read those. And I would try to draw the characters and stuff like that. So, because reading text is difficult for me, I find that I use visual materials to learn from, but I also created a habit of creating visual materials as a study guide for myself, as a way to
Hmm.
understand information. And that's, I guess, an adaptation that I made to be able to learn things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've used visuals as like their own language, right? And I hope that you can tell us a little bit about your story of going back to school in your 40s and uh, how your visual kind of acuity really helped in that experience there.
Yeah, I went back to school, maybe that's 15 years ago now,
Mm.
working towards a master's of social work, which I didn't end up getting into that program, but it was amazing doing the courses to try to get into it. I learned so much. And one of them was statistics for social sciences. And math was always something that I was very anxious about in school. I really struggled to learn it because I would just look at it and I would get really scared that I was going to get in trouble for not being able to learn it. And I just couldn't think and concentrate around that topic. It would just trigger me into the wrong state of mind for learning. So,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, I was intimidated by this course. I was lucky there was another person in the course who saw me furiously taking notes during the lecture, trying to understand things, and he asked if he would like a study pal. So we worked together a lot and helped each other through that course. He was really good at math. I was really good at understanding the concepts of like why we're doing the math. So we did great. But one of the things we had to do for the exam was memorize how, like, this really complicated organizational tree to try to
Okay.
figure
Yeah.
what, basically a flow chart of to figure out what kind of calculation you need to use to calculate certain kinds of information, significance of change in doing testing.
Yeah.
So they gave us a flow chart that was all made out of little boxes that looked identical and with like words in them, which I couldn't process very quickly. Some people can glance at the words and immediately the meaning goes in their head. But for me, I just see a shape with some marks in it. I have to turn this into something visual that makes sense to me. So I gave each box a shape that indicated the meaning of the text that was inside the box. I was already a graphic designer and illustrator at this point in my career, so I used those skills to build this thing. And I made it with different fonts, which a lot of graphic designers would say there's too many fonts, but for my brain, this font means a certain kind of information, and then this font means a certain kind of information, and different colors. And I was able to memorize this whole chart because of building it and because of making it visually make sense to me.
Mm.
And then I showed that to my professor, and she said, "Can I share this with the rest of the class?" And I said, "For sure, please do." So she did. And then after the exams, she came back to me and she said, there were other students who had memorized your chart and they drew it from memory on the back of their exam
Amazing.
page
Yeah. Yeah.
as a guide for them to be able to do the exercise. So that felt really good for me and also told me, oh, there's something valuable about being able to rearrange this to other people. It's not just me who needs a mitigation like this.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, there's like, I guess in the design world, you talk about user-friendly design or universal design or person-centered design or all these things, but like that general idea, right? That like something that is helpful to one person and that is an adaptation can really serve everybody and
Mhm.
make the world a better place by making things more easily interpretable or more easy to navigate and things like that. We come across this concept a lot in architecture, for example, or navigating spaces with, let's say, a wheelchair, and then you have also that benefits moms with a stroller, for example.
Mhm.
Examples like that where lots of people can benefit. So that's such a cool example of that. I love it. And I'd love to share this also with listeners because it's very cool. It looks great. For having all the colors and fonts, it's beautiful. And it really did bring me back to that exact class, which I also had to take in school. So I appreciate it. Yeah. Well, that's such a neat story and speaks to some of the ways that you've been able to really capture like visual learning
Hmm.
So I'm wondering if there are other things that you can break down in terms of like what visual learning is or the different sort of types of visual learning that people might rely on.
Okay, so the first one I think is about storytelling. There's a few books I've read about how the human brain is wired to process information through story. So that's really important to know. A lot of people can process data really well, like looking at lists and things, but my brain doesn't work that way. I can't very easily scan a list or remember a procedure. So if something gets turned into a story, it makes it easier to remember. And I read a book about memory athletes.
Oh, cool. What's a memory athlete?
They're people who memorize things competitively. So they go to an event and that might be like you're going to memorize the order of a complete deck of cards. So it gets shuffled and then they get to flip through it and they have to memorize and see how far into it they can
Oh,
remember
wow.
the order of
Okay.
the cards. So there's things like that or long lists of items. One of the main techniques that they use for remembering things is to create a story that includes the items that are on the list in the order as they go through
Mm.
the story. It's called a memory palace where you think of a building that you're familiar with, and then you create a story, like a movie in your mind, where you walk through the building and the things on the list are in there. And you have to make the story very silly so that memorable things are connected with the items. So, anyway, all that to say how the value of turning things into a story for learning information or learning even like cultural.
Cultural
Um,
humility or cultural competence skills, things like that, soft skills.
yeah.
You're crossing over into my land now
Yes.
because that's all I know a lot about that because it's what works. Like we find time and time again, scenarios are the things that people really cling to. And some people do like to have, okay, the scenario and then also a list. There are people who do pair those types of informations really well.
Mm.
But it's also weeks later, if you ask somebody what they retained from a training, normally it's the story that is still in there. And then if they have to reconstruct the meaning from the story, they may be able to do that. Whereas if you had just told them a straight up fact they had to remember, they might have a harder time with that. So the power of
Mhm.
stories is definitely extremely strong and well documented, but that visual storytelling is also really cool because we can tell stories with words, but some people really absorb it more through the visual and having like those little visual cues. I like the idea of the memory palace. That's really cool. Are there other ways that visual cues can be used in learning?
I mean, the nice thing about a lot of the work is it's a combination of words and images. So you have the story, you have the details in the words, and it kind of mimics how we experience life. And most of the media that we take in now is video based. So we're used to looking at images and words together and combining those two things to generate meaning. So there's another one that is symbols, which are culturally oriented, but in images you can use things that symbolize things like the icons in
Yeah.
your software.
Yep.
You can use literally those things right in your illustration and highlight them in the picture so that people get that, I don't know, for example, use a computer as a symbol of data processing or whatever. And there's so many tropes that come up again and again in illustration because it's a way to create a visual metaphor that people will understand quickly.
Right. Yeah. It just triggers that thing in your brain so quickly or so right away.
Mhm.
What about the idea of social cues, like visual social cues? I see this in your work all the time when you have people's expressions, for example, or, like
Yeah.
subtle things that just are screaming off the page. And it's just this like tiny little thing. You're like, how can it have that much power and meaning? And it does. That to me is astounding.
Yeah. One of the social cues is actually the eye direction, which way people are looking.
Mm,
You see what they're looking at, and then you give them an emotional expression, and you see how they're responding to what they're looking at. And that could be interacting with each other or interacting with objects in a room or looking at the scenario and responding to that. And then, like in a narrative, so when there's like multiple illustrations in a sequential sort of narrative, now you can create this social cause and effect. how people feel in conversation, however the conversation goes, and pairing that with words. So the expression on their face tells you their emotion, and then the words they say tell you another thing that they're trying to express. But you combine those two things together, and it gives you context of what they mean about the words that they're saying. So it's a cool interplay with word and image.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I mean, I feel like what I really want to do is just show people your work because the things that we're describing and talking about are the things that make your work stand out. And they just do sound like hard to describe, but when you see it, you know it, right? It's like the subtle things that is the difference between even like an AI generated image that I can make versus 20 images that you've produced to tell a story and convey emotion and cue up the learner or really communicate specific skills. Yeah, it's hard to describe, but man, when you see it, all of that information so tightly embedded into an image, it can be really astounding. It makes complete sense to me that from your childhood and from being immersed in a visual world, you have gathered all of these skills for visual storytelling and communication. But I'm sure also you've had your challenges when it comes to self-management and to participate in the conventional world of work. So I would love to hear if you're willing to share some tools or strategies that have helped you manage your energy and your focus and your time that you'd wish you'd known about sooner. Because just in case there's anybody listening here who's maybe earlier on in their journey and might benefit from hearing about those tools.
Yeah, sure. Well, the one I'm most recently embodied is sleep. So getting enough sleep. Often I am falling behind in my work because I get distracted and focus on things that should be focused on at different times. So I'm often cramming, doing all-nighters, but also just the nature of a freelance career. Work comes in waves. It doesn't come in a nice, even rhythm. So there are times when I have a lot on my plate and I need to get through all that work. To be honest, I love that when I'm super busy like that because then I get to hyper focus and I'm working late and there's no distractions. I put on some music that I like and I crank away. And so it's not all bad, but I do need to manage my sleep and that has helped a lot and my hydration. I hardly ever remembered to drink water before, so I would get really tired. So on top of being underslept, I would be dehydrated
Mm.
and then I would be exhausted at 3 in the afternoon and I couldn't think. And I would experience a lot of brain fog, which is like I can see that there's things going on around me and people are saying things and I can't process what it means.
Mm.
So sleep and hydration are big. Exercise is really important. I do meditation, not every day, but at least once a week and sometimes several times a week. I bought a book called Non-Drug Treatments for ADHD.
Okay.
The book is not against using medications. It's a book of things that you can do also.
Yeah, yeah. In addition.
Yeah, there were things in there about meditation, breathing exercises, supplements. Oh, yeah, so there's a supplement I started taking, which I think it's helping me a lot, and it's called Rhodiola rosea.
Okay.
And basically, it's a plant that grows in Arctic areas, and it just helps with focus. There's no noticeable effect that I can feel in my body when I use it, but I do find that actually my wife noticed before I did
Oh,
that
wow.
I was more present, more emotionally regulated using that. Plus, they
Mm.
have other supplements that they talk about taking. So I take a variety, lots of vitamin C and stuff. I don't know if it's all for ADHD, but I've been sick
It can't
in,
hurt, right?
yeah, I have not been sick in maybe 2 years since I started doing
Oh,
this.
wow. That's,
Yeah, so
I
it's
should look into
probably,
your supplement list because I cannot claim the same things, but
yeah,
yeah.
that plus the sleep and
Yeah. You just
And
sound
then,
healthy. I'm just like, yeah, these are all really good things. We should probably all be doing them.
yeah,
And to my shame, I like tuck my tail between my legs. I'm gonna go hide. Yeah, I could use, an extra glass of water and a good sleep sometimes too.
yeah.
So what about, I know you have also, in addition to like taking care of your body in a general way, which is obviously very important, and
Mm,
something that I'm also trying to tell my kids to do because they likewise will just not eat all day or like not drink all day and then they fall
mm,
apart and they're like, why? And I'm like, well, like would help if you just, had some sustenance and some hydration
yeah.
and that kind of thing. But there's also, like your brain wrangling techniques, which I'm sure
Mhm.
people would love to hear about how you can get past the challenging parts of time management. And when you have these complex projects that come at you in waves, like it
Mhm.
sounds overwhelming to anyone, let alone if you have challenges with focus or time management. So I'm wondering what you do specifically to help keep yourself on track.
Yeah. One of them is I use a project management software.
Hmm.
The one I use is called ClickUp, which is very affordable and you can buy a single seat. I'm a one person show, and a lot of them don't allow that. You have to buy 5 seats and so on.
Yep.
And it
Yeah.
turned out it's a really excellent and affordable program. And it allows me to visualize the information in a number of different ways so that I can look at a specific project. I can look at a group of projects. I can look at everything that's on my plate. I can see it as a visual timeline. So we're talking about visual, like structuring information visually.
Hmm.
It allows me to look at time as space and see and imagine the timeline moving down and I can see where all the deadlines are and the big block. So I can visualize it in a number of ways. I can also look at it as a table and resort things like you would in a spreadsheet. You can look at it like a Kanban with different columns and move them as tiles back and forth. So it's really great for someone like me. Whereas some people just use a list and that works great for them, but a list does not work great for me. So that's one. Another one is sort of wrangling my attention onto
Hmm.
things that I don't want to do, but have to be done.
Uh-huh.
I used to be really into gaming. I love computer games, puzzle games, mysteries, all kinds of games. So I decided, okay, I'm going to reframe my things I don't like doing and think of them as a game. And so then my little gamer brain gets kicks in and it starts going, okay, what do we need to do? What are the problems and what do we have to, and like we got to sort things a certain way and how do we solve the mystery or the puzzle
Yeah.
thing? I like sorting things for some reason, so there's a part of me that likes that. So if there's like organizing my information so I can sort of tap into these parts of myself that enjoy aspects of those tasks and I can get into it. The challenge with it is I get dysregulated, like, oh, I got to do my
Taxes?
accounting. Yeah, taxes, my accounting.
Yeah.
And I get anxious because I don't, it's complicated and I'm like, and then I avoid it and then it becomes an emergency. And then because I'm forced to, because the timeline is coming up, I put other things aside and I have to sit and focus on it. And once I start building momentum on the task, then I
Mm.
get really into it and I don't want to stop. So I start like using my sorting brain to find the things that need to be dealt with and then figure out what needs to happen with them. So use your gamer brain if you have that. Is
Yeah.
And another thing that ADHDers are famous for is file by pile. We don't put things away. We have things in piles all over, and it looks like a mess, but we know where things are, and it makes it visual. So I can look and know where things are and remember that's a thing that needs to be done because I can see it. The drawback to that is I can also get overwhelmed by having too many things open.
Too many piles.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a game of like how many piles are too many piles. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like these are really cool strategies, and a lot of them have to do with making things visual, which I guess, given your interest in visual learning, makes a lot of sense. Having your tasks open and being able to visualize them a bunch of different ways, or having everything organized in piles. These are such visual strategies, which is really cool.
Mm.
I did notice as we were setting up to chat today that you have like I don't know, 100 tabs open on your computer, which
Yeah.
was really funny. For me, if I get to that point, I get completely disoriented. Like I need to have maximum 10, let's say. And then
Yeah.
after that, I have to just close things out. I get overwhelmed. But it seems like for you, out in the open is the thing that works.
Yeah, and Google just this year came out with a function in there that you can make, it's like a folder, but you can collapse it and uncollapse it.
Okay, your tab like groups
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
Oh,
So you can
useful.
have as many tabs in there as you want, and then you just collapse it and it's down. Now it's only one tab. And if you don't want to see that, you can close that group and you can reopen it again later. So you know you're not going to lose all the tabs that are important to you in there.
What
So
if you accidentally close your browser window, though?
it saves them.
It
It's a
saves
set.
them. Oh,
Yeah,
amazing.
you just
Okay.
have to make sure you have it set to save all of your groups. And then, because that is what happened in the beginning, and I was very upset because I spent about 2 hours organizing everything in
All
the
your
folder
tabs.
into these tabs, and then they disappeared. But yes, so that is, I highly recommend using that. And then I can even safely close all those because I know I can get them back again.
I'm glad we're talking about all this stuff as kind of mundane as it seems. I think it is really empowering to hear that all of these little tweaks and tools are worth your time and energy to kind of, invest in and figure out what works for you. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering now, like, if, because you work both independently and you've also worked as part of larger teams, what challenges do you run into in structured work environments? Because part of what we talk about on this show is accommodations and making sure that everybody can be themselves at work. And yes, that people need different things to work their best and all of these kinds of ideas. And sometimes we fall short of that in the workplace.
Mhm.
I'm wondering how your strategies have been received in those structured work environments. If you've had any success with meshing them into what everybody else is doing or how that feels.
Yeah. In the early days of my career, I had a full-time job as an in-house illustrator at Creative Options. And there were slow times when I could go and have a rest somewhere. There was a staff room that nobody ever went into, and I would sometimes go and lay down and have a little nap in there. And it was something I needed to reset my brain.
Mm.
And I later spoke to another graphic designer who said, and he had his own office, so he could get away with this, but he would have a creative brief meeting with somebody, get all of the information in, and then close himself in the office, and he would go to sleep for 5 minutes, something like
Yeah,
that. It would
yeah.
refresh his brain, and then he would be able to synthesize all this information so much better.
Mm.
So, opportunities to rest at work. I know a lot of employers would probably be horrified by the idea of somebody sleeping at work, but it's really something that even if it's just for 5 minutes, I know Google had sleep pods at their offices for people for this exact reason. That would be great if there was a quiet room at the, at the
Yeah,
office that you
yeah.
could go and just put your head down, close your eyes for a moment. Um, and I guess open communication with the team.
Hmm.
I've only known that I have ADHD for 5 years, so I haven't actually done this much, but there are a few places where I've had, like, for instance, one of my big clients would do, I worked with them consistently for 5 years, and every year they would do a review, like they would with an employee, like a performance review.
Okay.
And one of the feedbacks was that they felt I was not engaged. And I have an issue with getting back to people when they've said something. So if I don't have
Okay.
the answer immediately, it doesn't even occur to me to say anything. But then I forget that they've asked a thing, and so it gets me into trouble sometimes. So I constantly have to have a discipline of like, oh, someone asked something, I should just at least let them know I got the message and then I'm thinking about it or something like that. So I did need to communicate with them like, I'm sorry, I feel bad. I don't mean to be rude, with the disengagement isn't because I don't want to talk to people or anything. It's just an issue I have because of my ADHD. So I disclosed that I have ADHD. Then I felt embarrassed about disclosing that, but I felt like I needed to to say it just so they know I didn't want them to take it personally.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Have you found that changes people's reaction to you or their responses to you? And with that sense of disclosure, does it make things better, worse? What do you think?
yeah, in that case, they didn't really answer me. So I
Oh,
don't
wow. That's a
I
little
don't really
ironic.
know how that went, how that landed for them. I just felt like I needed to say it, and it just satisfied my need for people to understand what's going on for me
Yeah.
so that I can kind of let it go. I would get super dysregulated because I feel like someone's disapproving of me or something. So I needed to say something so that I could let it go.
Right. That's also a feature of ADHD for some people, right? Is this rejection sensitive dysphoria. So
Mhm.
the idea of feedback, which isn't even necessarily super negative, could be like constructive bit of feedback or something, can just feel like such an attack, right? This story that you're telling is kind of making me think of that. Is that something that you identify and that you think you experience?
Yeah, wouldn't say that I experienced it as an attack. I just get embarrassed.
Okay,
So
interesting.
I feel like I should have had, I don't know what I feel, but it's just, I feel it's like a people-pleasing
Right.
response, right? And if someone's unhappy with me, I get anxious.
Yeah.
So I've had to do some work in myself because I can't expect other people to know what I'm feeling, especially if I don't say anything. But it's not even their fault. Now I've had to take on a discipline of allowing people to disapprove of me,
Mm.
which is if someone's unhappy with me, to kind of like let them be unhappy. Maybe they're not even unhappy with me and I'm just reading into their stress or something from another thing. And even if it is about me, then I still need to let them be unhappy. I can't fix everybody's emotions. So,
Scott, I'm still working on that one too.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't have ADHD, but I think the people pleasing runs deep, and there's definitely like an echo here with that sensation of receiving any type of feedback as like very anxiety inducing.
Mhm.
Do you think that there's anything? I mean, I've seen various posts and things going around on LinkedIn. I think I've posted about this myself about how we should be cautious when approaching feedback conversations because there are people in our midst, whether they have ADHD or not, like who can have pretty big reactions to feedback. Like, is there anything as colleagues or leaders that we need to know in order to deliver feedback in a way that it can be integrated and that it's most useful?
I guess setting a context of where that feedback is coming from and what does it mean for the person would be helpful. And you could even set a culture beforehand of like understanding, like when I was in art school, it was understood that you're going to have a critique and that people are going to look at things that were less well executed and tell you about it. So that was really good training for taking feedback.
I
And
bet.
yeah, one of my best teachers, I specifically sought her out because she was known for being super direct. And there were stories of students running out of the room in tears during critiques with her. And I thought, okay, that's the teacher who's going to get the best out of me. And I'm ready for it. I'm going to like not take it personally and learn. I'm there to learn. I had another teacher tell me to do that. He said, if you want to
Mm,
be good at something, you get the hardest teachers, not you don't want the bird courses. So I loved her. Her name was Margaret Priest. She's won many awards for teaching. She pushed us hard. She was very direct, British, you know. So, and it was great. It was great. I always took it as a coming from a place of care. She cared about her
right. Yeah.
students.
But
Uh,
because that context existed around her, or
yes.
there was, I wonder what it is. Is it like the expectation that there's going to be feedback, or the way that how did she communicate that care? Like, what made it okay for her to be a truth teller?
She had this reputation for being hard-nosed, but I didn't see her that way.
Hmm.
Just very direct and you could tell by the way she communicated with the students that she cared about them. She would encourage people and tell them what was great in their work and you
So it's balanced, right? Like, I
yeah.
guess that's one way of thinking about that. It being balanced, I guess, is
Yeah.
important. And it
Mhm.
sounds like she's, really invested in your growth. And in an employment situation, that's a big deal too. If you're, hearing feedback from a colleague or a supervisor and you don't think that it's coming from a place where they want you to grow and improve and you think they might be trying to get rid of you, that's a very different levels of threat.
Yes.
Something else that I've heard is like the idea of timing of feedback in order to give people a chance, if they do have an outsized reaction, to have that reaction. And so you're not going to have your feedback meeting right before a big group meeting, for example,
Mm,
so that people can take a breath, they can go for a walk, they can do whatever they need to do afterward,
okay.
to kind of come back to their senses, which I think is like super great advice given what I know about some people's responses. So I love that story. And I think, yeah, I wish I could meet Margaret Priest and have her give me some feedback. It'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it really helped me because a lot of the work that I do is technical and
Hmm.
the requirements are very specific. There's always lots of feedback. Oh, that person can't be holding a cell phone or their posture's wrong or things like
Mm.
that. And I've just taken on the attitude that this work is a collaboration between me and the client. They're the expert, they know what they need, and I'm here to help them get what they need, as opposed to me saying, but the way I've done it is perfect, and I don't want to redraw that because it looked so good and whatever, right? Like, so it's so I have a process actually that is very iterative, and I just go in there expecting changes.
Yeah.
And that helps me a lot. Like I'm like, okay, give me the changes. I'm looking for the changes. I want to know how to make this right for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's so great. In terms of like workplace training or learning and development,
Mhm.
what is it that you want to tell people about what they should be aware of with regards to different people's needs in learning? Because I think a lot of materials and things that we create are not necessarily reaching out to everybody.
Mhm.
So, what is it that your type of work can really do to enhance that learning experience?
Yeah. Well, if I can reach out to a lot of the people that create safety information, so that's a big part of my niche is safety. And it's so detailed and complicated. Every region and every industry has really specific needs. And I get that it's hard to create a special thing for each little niche within that. But a lot of the material that comes out is like, we need to comply with all this information. So here's a
Yeah.
giant binder full of text. Have fun learning that. And it's like, oh man, I would not learn it. Like it's just too much text. So I spoke to a lot of safety trainers to see what their experience is and what do they need from someone like me and to figure out what, actually, a really good question a friend of mine told me to ask them is what hacks are they doing to make this information digestible for the people they're trying to train?
Hmm.
And they're making their own infographics and cobbling things together, and they're grabbing example images off the internet and
They're doing instructional design, Scott.
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
They're taking a giant block of this is must be what you go through
Yeah. Oh,
in
yeah.
every project, a
Yep.
giant block of text and rules,
Yeah.
and you got to make it something people can learn.
Or like 57 disparate articles that people wish were inside of people's brain at work. And then it's like, okay, how do we get it in there? But
Yeah.
yeah, I just think like that visual storytelling piece is so important. And also given the fact that we have not only you on the outside as an illustrator, but, people a lot like you on the inside of companies who are needing to learn this material. So for me, it's also just like a very important reminder to make sure that when we're communicating things that are important at work, we have various channels and modes that we're expressing that through,
Yeah.
and visual storytelling being one of them and a very important one. And it often just does feel like it's the icing on the cake, but for some people, it's the whole cake. And I think that that's a really important thing to remember.
Yeah. There's a
Yeah.
lot of different learning styles. Some people do not process images well, and some people do not process text well, and so on. So As you said, I think it's really important to have the information coming in a lot of different forms so that people can process it the way their brain works.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Scott, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for being on the show with me today and for sharing your story with us. From discovering your ADHD later in life to building all of these creative systems that work for you to helping others also and coaching others to find their own path. What stands out in your journey for me is how self-awareness and community have really transformed what have in the past felt like limitations into sources of strength and creativity, which is really hopeful for those of us who are at the start of that journey, or like in my case, helping guide young people along the way. So I really think it's important for everybody to think about the implications of neurodivergence also for learning design and communication and marketing and all kinds of workplace interactions. So you've brought so many ideas up in this conversation. So thank you so much for doing that.
It's my pleasure, Dominique, and thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to say that we'll have you back again. If we can find even more to dig into, that would be wonderful to catch up one more time.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So, listeners, if you're curious about Scott's work, which you absolutely should be, please follow the links in the show notes to his website and to his LinkedIn. I've never seen so much information and emotion packed into an illustration, truly. And please reach out to me if you'd like to be featured as a guest on this podcast or if you'd like to nominate someone. I really love having conversations with L&D, HR, and DEI professionals who are passionate about their message, or with folks in adjacent fields like Scott, who have something to teach us in these people and culture and learning roles. So if you like what you're hearing, please leave us a rating and a review or share this episode to your own socials. It truly does help get the podcast into more ears. I'm Dominique. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time on Just One Q.